Hello and welcome. This is Voices to Dream, and we are all about giving people a voice, letting people know that every voice counts, that everyone has a story to tell, and that through dreaming, we are able to spread hope in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Suzanne Mann, and I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, Dr. Richard Harris.
Thanks for having us. Hi, hello everyone. And
tonight I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that we have a really interesting guest today, and I think he's going to maybe be a little bit challenging as well. We have from Queensland, Australia, David Gillespie. Thank you for joining us, David.
G'day. Hi, good to be here.
I'm particularly thrilled to have David. He's been an absolute mentor and guru to me. The amount of times I've said to my patients, read this chap's book, this is potentially going to change your life, I've done it a lot in my last 10 years. And my daughter handed me David's book 12 years ago. I was about to go on holidays and I read it, and suddenly things made a whole lot of sense. And I thought it was a brilliant analysis and really changed my perspective on, the origins of atherosclerosis, for instance. And I think David crystallized for a lot of people and made simple for a lot of people. So look, a wonderful guest, and thanks so much for coming and joining us today, David.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Now, David you're going to ask David about his background. I mean, it's quite a transition from what you were doing, David, to where you are now and what you've achieved. Can you run us through a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay. So I'm not qualified to write about any of the things that I write about. I'm not a nutritionist, a doctor, psychologist, any of the above. In fact, most people would say I'm not qualified to write about anything because my day job is a lawyer. And it's the one thing I don't write about. And I think that's a good thing because one of the things I think I can bring to the things that I write about is the outsider's view. I can't get fired for what I say about sugar or about polyunsaturated fats or about psychopaths or, anything else that I write about. So I get to just go where the evidence takes me. And it was that kind of interest in what the evidence was saying that I guess led me to write Sweet Poison in the first place. I had, like most Australian men, spent most of my life getting fatter. And I'm of a body type where, I just have to, read the label on a packet of Tim Tams and I'll gain 5 kilos. I was getting pretty good at putting on weight. And we had 4 kids under the age of 8, I think. And then my wife rather inconsiderately announced that we were having twins. And I, in my massively overweight state, I wasn't coping with the 4 kids we had, let alone adding twin babies to the mix. And I would be dealing with the 4 kids because twins would be taking her out of the mix for a fair old time, because she's always breastfed all of our kids for the first year of their lives. So breastfeeding twins is a full-time job. And I thought to myself, you know what, I've got to do something about this inexorable increase in weight. And it's not like I hadn't tried anything up to that point. I'd done what everyone had done. I'd seen the stories on the television about the cabbage soup diet or the, don't eat bread diet or whatever you want to call it. I'd seen them all and I tried them all, and they all worked. They all worked for exactly as long as my willpower held out, which in my case was about 2 weeks. I don't have much willpower. So in those 2 weeks, I would lose about 1 kilo a week and all good, but I would be hating every single second of it. And I would be fighting against my body's desire to eat again. And I thought, this can't be right. This can't be the way it's supposed to work. How come we're the only animal on the planet that requires a manual intervention via willpower to control our weight? Every other animal does it automatically. It eats exactly as much as it needs to maintain its energy balance. And I thought, well, you know, it's the 21st century. We must know the answer to this by now. And I went looking for the answers. And I thought, so I started with the official health advice, which was eat less fat. Apparently, on the theory that fat makes us fat. It turns out that that's about as true as eating cucumbers makes us green. But it was the dominant thing. It still is today. And I went looking for the evidence behind that. And what I found is that there isn't any. There's a bunch of guesswork. There's a bunch of obvious assumptions. And it all boiled down to a really stupid thing, which was, well, fat has 9 calories per gram, and protein and carbohydrates has 4 calories per gram. Therefore, gram for gram, fat will make you fatter than carbohydrates or protein. Yes, it really was that stupid. And there was no science to it whatsoever. In looking at all of that, that was all pretty disheartening. But what I found is that there was actually an entirely different line of science that had not become the mainstream thinking, started by a fellow by the name of John Yudkin, who was the first professor of human nutrition ever in the world, and also the first one for the London School of Nutrition. Started just after the Second World War. And he didn't buy any of that because, unlike everybody else who was spouting nonsense, he'd actually tried to make lab animals fat by feeding them fat. And it didn't work. So he thought, well, you know what? Let's try some other things. Maybe there's a metabolic process here. Maybe it's not just maths. And what he found was that sugar was an extremely effective way to make lab animals fat. Better than that, he wanted to narrow down, knowing that sucrose, or table sugar, is 2 molecules of sugar, fructose and glucose. He wanted to know, well, he theorized that if glucose was the problem, we had a very big problem, because he knew that we were a machine designed to run on glucose as our primary fuel source. So he thought, well, it must be the other half of sugar. It must be the fructose part. And he did experiments to prove it, and he did prove it. Couldn't make animals fat with glucose, but he could with fructose. And he didn't know a lot of what we know today. A lot of the science that proved his theories didn't happen until the 80s, 90s, and noughties. But in essence, he was absolutely correct, which was that it was fructose via metabolic dysfunction that was making humans fat. And the bad news was that making humans fat was the least of what it did, the very least. In fact, if that's all it did, it would be irrelevant. It might be relevant to Instagram models, but everybody else could safely get on with their lives and not care about it at all. Having discovered all that, I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try removing fructose. Easier said than done, I discovered, because I thought removing fructose meant not adding sugar to your tea or coffee. But in fact, what it meant was reading a lot of labels, discovering that everything in our food supply is full of it, and having to substantially change everything I ate.
So you didn't have a lot of
in the oddest ways.
You kind
it
of
was in
did
the
all
oddest
this
ways
research yourself,
Yeah, no. Well, there wasn't any popular literature. Just before Sweet Poison came out, way too late to be helpful to me, Robert Lustig, who's quite a nice chap in the United States, who I've subsequently met, put out a video. He's a pediatrician, and he put out a video essentially saying, yeah, look, fructose is the culprit, and here's the science that proves it. by then I'd already done all the science, and so that was remarkably unhelpful of him to come out with that just before I published the book, not before I started writing it. But anyway, that was it. That was it for popular media at the time. Now that YouTube video, very dry video of him explaining the science on fructose, has had some enormous number of hits on it now, as people have gotten their heads around this problem. But at the time, there was nothing. And I would explain this to people and who would notice, because I lost 40 kilos by not eating sugar. And remarkably for me, have kept it off since then. Now you're looking at me and thinking, well, geez, he doesn't look like Brad Pitt. It doesn't work like that. It just takes you to the weight your body's going to be. But it keeps it there. It means that you no longer do what I had spent the first 35 years of my life doing, which was struggling against the fact that my weight would increase every minute of every day. Whereas now it doesn't. It's just normal. I eat when I'm hungry. I don't eat when I'm not, and everything's fine.
So you wrote Sweet Poison, David, and what do you think you've achieved with that? Like in terms of turning around thinking, and where do you see that as having had an impact?
Well, thinking has definitely changed. Now, whether it's me that's done it or somebody else or whatever, I don't much care, honestly. But the thinking has changed. And when Sweet Poison came out, I had the Heart Foundation putting out press releases telling people that I was a dangerous maniac, essentially. So I had cardiologists getting on radio shows to debate me about how wrong I was. Now, that's all changed. You got to remember, at the time, the Heart Foundation was making quite a lot of money out of handing out ticks to products, and their tick formula did not have sugar in it at all, which meant that they gave ticks to Milo, a product which is pure sugar, that they gave ticks to fruit bars that are nothing but sugar. And when this was publicly pointed out by me, they weren't best pleased about it, which is why I guess they had a campaign against me. But they weren't the only ones. Dietitians actively worked against me, actively at every turn. Not that I mind. I mean, there's nothing worse in life than publishing a book that everybody ignores. You want a good fight. It tells you you're on the right track. But the interesting thing was it has changed. It didn't change overnight. It didn't change even in a year. I guess there's that famous quote of Bill Gates, which says nothing changes in a year and everything changes in 10 years. And that's about what's happened. I mean, now it's pretty accepted. You are not going to get much fight from anybody in the medical or dietetics community if you go out there and say sugar is a bad thing and you should not be consuming it. A lot of people, I mean, the official dietary advice, by the way, has not changed. But the man on the street advice probably has.
There's still cardiologists that are going on about saturated fats. And that
I think that's a really good marker of someone you shouldn't go anywhere near with a barge pole, honestly. Because look, I couldn't be certain to, and I said this in Sweet Poison about heart disease. Sugar is implicated, definitely. Is it the primary driver? I'm not so certain. I think seed oils probably are a bigger factor, but certainly sugar and seed oils together in your diet is a really effective way to give yourself heart disease if the cancer doesn't kill you first.
Gosh, you're making life easy for moms, aren't you? I'm sure there's some dads out there as well. But as a mother of 3, I'm thinking, wow, that's, because I must say, I'll tell you tonight, David, I was making fried rice, which ended up being gluggy, but that's a different story. I actively, because I knew we were talking to you, I looked at the ingredients, and the second ingredient on every sauce I tried to use, like soy sauce, oyster sauce, mirin, sweet chili. I sort of expected that one. The second ingredient on all of them was sugar.
And
that actually blew my mind a bit.
Yeah, well, it's even worse because it is actually possible in most food categories to find a brand that doesn't do that. You've just got to find it. It's like a little treasure hunt in the supermarket. I did put out a book back in 2016, which I haven't updated, and I really must, because people constantly ask me for it, where I went through every category and found it. Found the brand that you should buy. I'm more focused now on seed oils, so I am doing a series at the moment on my Facebook page where I do that for seed oils because it's harder. With sugar, at least, it is actually labeled. You can see a line there that says sugar and the amount per 100 grams, and there's a pretty easy rule of thumb, which is if it's more than 3 per 100, put it back. It's that easy. Seed oils is much, much harder than that.
I noticed actually, because I saw your post, I think it was either yesterday or today, in regards to the CCs versus one of the one of the Coles brand ones.
That's right, the free from, yes.
And I must admit, again, I looked at that and I went, seriously, I would not have picked that. I am that person who goes, oh, it's free from. Yeah, that must be better for me.
It's got a lot of good stuff on the front of the label, but you really have to read the fine print.
Yeah. Oh gosh. There's a lot of homework that's going to be.
Sorry, we went way off track there, and we've probably ruined your whole script as well. So yeah, anyway,
talk about whatever. The theory I've had is that, you know, if you're a skinny person, you're kind of eating between 10 and 20 grams of sugar a day. If you're a massively obese person, you're kind of on 150, 200 grams of sugar plus a day, just to kind of maintain the overeating and the addiction. Do you kind of subscribe to that, the scale type thing? That's my little personal theory over obesity.
I haven't really thought about it, honestly. I think it's probably got a lot to do with the genetic type you are. The body type you are is the body type you are, and all sugar is going to do is magnify whatever is already going on. So everybody knows people who, you know, who could eat the entire contents of a supermarket and not gain a gram. They have an evolved body type which is not particularly good at converting food to stored energy. You know, and there are other people who, as I said, can read the packet, read the label, and gain weight. What fructose does is it takes whatever your standard body type is and accelerates and magnifies that. And so if you're a person who's prone to put on a bit of weight, if you get into the carbs, eating sugar will make that go much, much faster and quicker. You know, you'll have a huge effect. If you're a person who wouldn't put on weight no matter how much of anything you ate, then the amount of sugar you eat probably wouldn't make any difference to your weight. But as I said, the least of the concerns with sugar is weight. Weight is just a visible symptom for a certain body type, and that body type is about probably 70 to 80% of the population. But it's kind of irrelevant because the fructose does damage at a different level to 100% of the population, which is the fructose is metabolized directly to fat in the liver, enters circulation as fat, and we have absolutely no controls over that process because we evolved in an environment where fructose was extremely rare and there was no need for us to evolve a control for fructose. We have excellent controls for fat, fantastic controls for glucose, our two primary energy sources. You know, that will stop us on a dime when we've got enough energy on board. Fructose is completely invisible to both of those systems.
Can I just ask so I'm going to ask a layperson's question to the vascular surgeon in the room. So with all of this though, and I know this is, we're getting a bit off topic, but with all of this, by eating the fats then and taking the sugar part out of the diet, is that doing something else though to your cholesterol or to your arteries and, you know, filling you up with other?
There still is a lot of controversy about that, but there is pretty reasonable evidence that if you're eating high fructose diets and poor quality processed food diets, you're going to be getting into the bad types of cholesterol. And people are only just starting to research the different types. It's not just LDL and HDL, but it's different types of LDL and HDL. And So yeah, it's not so simple. But there are people that argue that if you replace saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats, you have less heart disease. I mean, but I don't think they're great quality studies. So there's so much controversy about all of these things.
But there shouldn't be any controversy. Mechanically, it's nonsense. It really is. It's oxidized LDL is the culprit when it comes to heart disease. And you might say, well, where do you get oxidized LDL from? Well, you need the LDL for starters. You need small, dense LDL particles. And
just
that's
so you guys
exactly
know, you're saying LDL. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Low density lipoproteins.
Okay.
Yeah, they're little things.
Yeah, sorry. I'm glad you said that because I would have just kept saying it. Yeah. So it's
when you're saying where you get the LDL from, I don't know what you're talking about.
So
are we talking about eat avocado?
They're basically discovering different types of these things that float around in your blood that have bad effects on you. So these oxidized LDLs are probably the most dangerous. And so if you're eating trans fats, the worst types of fats, you're going to get.
All I want to know is what I should eat and what I shouldn't eat.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's bring it back to that. The really best place to get oxidized LDL is to eat something that contains sugar and polyunsaturated fat. The sugar delivers the small, dense LDL, and the polyunsaturated fat delivers the oxidation.
Is this why? Sorry, something's just happened to our screen there. Donuts are one of the worst things to eat.
If they're fried in seed oil. If you're frying them in animal fat, they're fine. Unfortunately, no one fries them in animal fat anymore.
Right. Okay. Because you've got the sweet and
lard is a thing of the past, but that would be a good.
Oh gosh. Okay.
But no. See, this I think is one of the greatest crimes against humanity committed by the health hierarchy, is convincing people like McDonald's to switch from cooking in animal fat in 2004, which they'd done entirely up until 2004, to switching over to seed oils after 2004. KFC did exactly the same thing in 2012. Everywhere has done it by now. And they do it because the Heart Foundation tells them it's healthy.
Is olive oil a seed oil?
Olive oil is a fruit oil.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about what a seed oil is. We probably don't want you. I don't know if you want to do this
good.
on this
that's
show
good.
today.
No, we want you to give us your wisdom, David. So it's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. So a seed oil is obviously an oil from a seed or a legume. It's just easier to call a seed oil than a seed and legume oil. But so soybeans, sunflower seeds, canola seeds, corn oil, almond oil, safflower oil. Have I missed any big ones?
Rapeseed.
Yeah, all grapeseed oil, hemp seed oil. Whole bunch. If it's a seed and it creates an oil, then in all probability it's extremely bad for you because it has a very high level of omega-6 fat. Won't go into why that matters just yet, but that's what a seed oil is. Fruit oils, olive oil, coconut oil, palm oil, are all fine. They have a fat profile which is very, very similar.
I've got one thing right. Those are the ones we're eating at home.
Yeah. The trouble is not so much the oil that we add, which is relatively very, very small amount. It's like the sugar you add to your tea. If you think that deleting sugar means not putting sugar in your tea, then you're way wrong. And it's the same with oil. Most of the oil we consume is already in our food. So almost everything on the supermarket shelf has serious amounts of seed oil added to it. So that example I gave of the difference between the CC's corn chips and the I'm Free From corn chips, the difference between the two is the fat that they're cooked in. So the CC's are cooked in palm oil, the others are cooked in, I think, sunflower oil. And that changes the amount of polyunsaturated fat and therefore the amount of oxidized LDL circulating in their system.
It gets quite complicated to educate people about all of these subtleties, though, doesn't it?
I mean, it does. The oil one is really hard.
Yeah, really hard.
I still haven't got the oil one right. Look how confused I'm making you.
I think, but you know what I was thinking? I think I actually use sunflower margarine.
No.
No, bin that.
Bad.
Yeah, really bad.
God, here I was thinking.
No, butter. Butter is the way to go.
Supposedly, it actually lowers your cholesterol, though.
No.
Well,
Bad
maybe
cholesterol.
it does, but it doesn't decrease your chances of heart disease.
No, margarine's really
In fact,
bad.
on some of the biggest reanalysis of those works tell us that it probably increases your risk of heart disease by just that one substitution.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna need some time in front of my pantry after this, and my fridge and my
You're
freezer.
giving me an idea, though, is that margarine's the next one I have to do with those comparisons.
Okay, yeah. I'm already liking. I'm following you on Facebook. I'll make sure I'm watching that every day.
Is that Eat Real Food, David? Because that's the one I've been telling most people about.
Yeah, Eat Real Food is the book. Yeah, all of this is in Eat Real Food, but all I'm doing is just bringing out a few examples because it's really tricky. I mean, to this day, my wife will ask me before going to the supermarket, "Now, hang on, what was the brand I was supposed to buy of this or that product?" Because it's hard to remember which are the ones that have the low oil because there's nothing on the labeling that says it.
Yeah.
You need an app. You need an app that we can put on our phone.
That's right.
That we
you
just
scan
walk across and it goes bing,
puts
bing,
a red
bing,
light on.
This one gets a tick and this one gets a cross.
Yeah.
Well, should we bring us back to, do you want to read have a look at our systems, our dreams part of our podcast?
So I wrote this book called Imagine, David, and it's where I'm the dictator of the world. So one of the things I'm passionate about and have been for the last 12 years since reading your book, Sweet Poison, and others since then, was trying to get people healthy by getting rid of processed foods and sugar and all the rest. So part of my story, which is this bit's based in Mexico, is based in a little town called San Cristobal de las Casas. Beautiful place, absolutely gorgeous. So I'll just read the passage and then maybe you can give your impression and how you would like to see the world. What's your dream of the world? So in San Cristobal de las Casas, the mountain streams provided the local Tzotzil peoples traditionally with pure water for drinking for many centuries, until the day that the bubbly cola factory set up in the town 50 years ago. The soaking rains on the carefully manicured agricultural plots had given the people the organic sustenance that had kept them healthy and active on the high mountain tracks. On I Day, about 3/4 of the adults and 1/3 of the children were obese, and a half of these had diabetes. The town had many people dying in their 40s and 50s, and this is actually true, of heart disease and the slower death of nerves and eyes and kidneys from rampant diabetes in the community. On I Day, the bubbly cola factory that had been established in the town just those 50 years prior was razed to the ground by the community. There was no violence to the workers or anger. There was just a final recognition of the destruction that had been wrought by the presence of that enterprise within their midst. An enterprise that had, in fact, taken their precious mountain streams and secured for them routes of getting processed foods that ultimately became even part of their sacred ceremonies. Bubbly cola had entered the hearts and minds and bodies of the good people of San Cristobal and made them very, very sick indeed. Such was the addiction created that people actually believed the soda could heal people, and prayers over cans of cola became blended with the Catholic and Mayan culture, establishing legitimacy for the sugar that would ultimately cut them down in sickness and early death. Within 2 months, little Jose Martinez lost 8 kilos and was off the medications to lower his cholesterol and sugar. His attention span in school was now normalized. He loved that his physical abilities and strength was returning. His previous diet of 2 cans of cola a day with his donuts and cakes was just a horrid aberration of the last few years, and he was loving the traditional plant-based and organic food his family now carefully prepared. So that's my little fantasy, if you like, of how life would change if everyone was clever and intelligent and cooperative and their brains were working properly, and we could make decisions to lead these ideal lives, I guess, if you like.
Right. You could have written that about any Indigenous community in Australia.
Yeah.
It's the same issue there, and I mean, even you would have noticed the story this week about the rheumatic heart disease. The girl who was turned away from Dulmiji Hospital, I think it was on 60 Minutes this week, who had rheumatic heart disease, and it's rife in Indigenous communities, and it's mostly rife in Indigenous communities because of teeth decay or tooth decay. That gives them strep A, gives them rheumatic fever, gives them rheumatic heart disease, all very easy to treat, none of it treated. But there's plenty of sugar to make sure their teeth keep decaying. And I think that's the problem here, is that these lines are not drawn clearly enough, and there are too many really powerful vested interests fighting against ever making them clear. And so while it's really great that people at Bondi know this stuff and know to have avocado on toast instead of Nutella on toast, the people that it is really, really hurting at the moment don't know it. And there is a lot of people with real money at stake in making sure they never know it. And that's the bit we have to address. We've already done the bit where 20% of the population, probably the richest 20% of the population, know this stuff and avoid sugar like the plague. We need to get the other 80% over the line.
How do we go about educating people?
You can only do it the way we're doing it now. If you'd asked me this when Sweet Poison came out, I'd say, well, we just tell them. Well, sure, you can, but people need to hear it a lot, and they need to see it a lot, and they need to see your predictions about what happens come true. And eventually it changes behavior, but it is a lot slower than just telling people.
I mean, Australia's been particularly poor in, from a legislative point of view, addressing these sort of issues on a community basis. Say sugar taxing, even in New York or in the UK, they've got those sort of laws in place. But we had this, I'd have to say, Queensland marginal seats are a problem in this regard.
Our electoral system is a problem with all. There are 7 seats in Australia that are swung by sugar votes, that are swung by sugar farming. Unfortunately, those 7 seats tend to swing the election, so no one's ever going to do in the current system anything to really harm those electorates. And the really ironic thing about it is that 30% of those sugar farmers were growing tobacco leaves, half a century ago. They don't care. They're farmers. As long as there's something that they can grow and sell for a profit, they don't much care what it is. So we have to start thinking a little bit outside the box. And one of the ideas I've had is, well, we should be growing palms. We should be growing palm oil. Palm oil is a safe, fantastic substitute for seed oils. The corporations love it because they still get to call it vegetable oil. I would love it because it would be grown sustainably rather than destroying, orangutan habitat in Malaysia and Indonesia to do it. And Queensland has the perfect climate for it. Get rid of the sugarcane, replace it with palm oil crops that make more money, and it will be better for everybody.
Have you tried to implement that, David? Has that been something you've had?
I have talked to some sugar farmers about that, and their first objection to it is, good, but we need milling facilities. They say the reason they grow sugar is because there's sugar milling capabilities, and they don't know anything about what's required for palm oil, palm oil processing. And the reality is not much, because it's really peasants doing it on small land holdings in Malaysia. But you need a government that's prepared to take that on and say, we will put in the infrastructure necessary to convert this to a much more profitable crop that has a real future. Sugar doesn't have a future, by the way. It just doesn't know it's dead yet.
Yeah, but it's been going for 4 or 5 centuries. And the horrible thing about it really is that it tastes very nice. That's
Well, it's addictive.
essential.
I mean, it has addictive policy. I mean, it has an
It's
addictive
wrapped up
characteristic.
in this history of candy and chocolates.
Well, it's addiction. It's nothing more complicated than addiction. I mean, the last book I put out, and the one before that, Teen Brain and Brain Reset, go into the mechanisms of addiction, and in particular look at, as an example, how sugar is addictive. And even when I said that in Sweet Poison as an off-the-cuff sort of thing that I couldn't prove, people use that to attack sweet poison in general. The science has now caught up to it. It is addictive. We can prove it's addictive. We know how it's addictive. And that's why it's in our food supply. If they could put heroin in our food supply and get away with it, they would. Next best thing is sugar.
Is there one of the practical things, I can go blue in the face telling my patients that the reason you're on statins and the reason that you got heart and arterial disease is because you eat too much sugar, and the reason you're obese and you can't walk and you're getting osteoarthritis. But the behavior change is so hard. So only a small percentage of my patients have been convinced by me. I've probably had more success convincing people to stop smoking.
But how much success do you think you'd have talking someone out of being an alcoholic or you might if they're sufficiently motivated, but you got to do a lot more than talk to people to break an addiction.
Sure.
Which is why, in essence, I'm not a giant fan of psychology. Talk therapy doesn't change much. Biochemistry changes a lot. As soon as you understand the biochemistry that you're fighting against, then you've got a much better chance.
Yeah. But in practical terms, have you got any advice for people?
Look, absolutely. I wrote a whole book full of advice on that. The Sweet Poison Quit Plan, which is the follow-up to Sweet Poison, is exactly that. It's meant to be a plan. Forget the science, forget all the complicated hoo-ha. What am I supposed to do tomorrow morning when I want to put Nutella on my toast? That's, and what am I supposed to do when my kids are asking to go to a party where I know they're going to eat their body weight in sweets? That's the book that has that advice in it. It is intensely practical, and it applies to sugar. Actually, you could apply it to any addiction, and I kind of sort of did in Brain Reset, where I talk about other addictions and take it a little bit further, and because the science has come a little bit further since that book was written. But nevertheless, I think it's still an excellent, if I say so myself, an excellent guide to, if you really want to stop eating sugar, that's how you do it.
Sure.
My goodness. Yes. But, so seriously though, now, besides reading the book, tomorrow morning, what do I do when my kids say, "What's for recess, Mum?"
Yeah.
And I look in the cupboard and I say, "Are you going to have some carrot sticks? Because I can't give you the cookies or the hot cross bun now." What do I do?
Give them chips. So I would give them. I would give them chips. The kids regard that as a treat just as much as sweet things.
Seriously, chips.
And as long as they're the right chips. Like if you, if you look at the post I did before the one about corn chips, I did the one about salted potato chips. And there's big differences between the brands there too in terms of seed oil content. So as long as they're the right chips, in that case, I think it was the Red Rock. Yes, it was the Red Rock Deli ones, which are the lowest in polyunsaturated fats. So, chips is a good alternative.
I'm writing down eat chips.
I
love chips.
Or any snack that doesn't involve. If it tastes sweet, you don't want them eating it. Okay. The
popcorn?
surest sign.
Popcorn's good then?
Well, popcorn's fine as long as it's cooked in the right oils. Once again, that's another one I should do a comparison on. As long as it's cooked in the right oils, then it's fine. So as long as the fats are right and it doesn't taste sweet, then you're all good. And you'll find that there's actually quite a lot of things that fit into that category. Like you could have a pie and chips as long as you don't put tomato sauce on it, and the chips are cooked in animal fat, not deep fried in seed oil. You can just have the pie.
Very hard to get chips anywhere that are not cooked in.
You can't if you buy them outdoors, but we have chips all the time here because we just buy them frozen. The pre-cooking the first cook that is done on frozen chips actually absorbs very, very little of the fat. It's the second cook where you deep fry them. So your average takeaway gets big bags of frozen chips that have very little fat in them at all, dunk them in seed oil, and then serve them to you, and they're full of seed oil. Yeah. If you do at home, if you buy the frozen chips and fry them in animal fat, which you can buy from your supermarket, Super Fry, it's a bread cube of fat, it's beef fat. You just fry that in on the stove, and you can cook your own chips. They're better than anything you could buy out, and much crisper and nicer tasting, and much better for you.
I just pop mine in the oven and don't put any oil on them.
Well, you can do that too. Yeah, if you're happy with that. Our kids, now that they've had chips fried in beef fat, are not happy with something that's been done in the oven. But yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Put them in the oven. Okay. Yeah, then you're not adding any fat to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, even better.
Now, I agreed with 99.9% of things you wrote in Sweet Poison and Consequent books. But there was one thing you said that sugar caused varicose veins. Now, that I was a bit shocked by that one. So I don't know whether that needs another little look at the evidence for that one.
I can't remember that passage at all.
You're
the first person who's even asked me about it. So I don't know.
All the arterial stuff, I'm with you. Like all of this stuff, I totally agree is a major inflammatory cause of atherosclerosis. But yeah, varicose veins are more genetic and got to do with professions and people standing up for too long. 30 million years ago, we decided to stand up.
I'm incapable of making stuff like that up. So if I put that in a book, it will be referenced. I will have gotten it from somewhere. Now, maybe it's right and maybe it's not. I'm also not incapable of being wrong. I haven't looked at it since I wrote it. Clearly, I don't even recall it. But happy to look at it again.
I was just thinking, and I just wanted to, it's actually going back a little bit, but when we were talking about for example, I love that not only did you say that, the sugar farmers shouldn't be, we should get rid of the sugar farmers, but you actually you've thought of what the solution is there, because it's all well and good to say, stop, get rid of the cigarette factories or whatever, but these are livelihoods, in San Cristobal, where you're talking about that, the bubbly cola factories, what are those people doing then once that's gone? So I love that. But one of the things I'm just wondering as well is, where do we start in the process though? Say, if we rule the world, is the first process actually getting our sauce companies, the tomato sauce Heinz and stuff, to actually stop putting sugar in it? Where's the start? Where's the chicken, and which is the chicken and which is the egg, sort of thing?
You have to start with people wanting it to change. So when the sort of first wave of sugar fanaticism started, Sarah Wilson became quite popular for a while there with her quit sugar things. And when that was happening, a lot of sauce companies did come out with zero sugar sauces. You can't buy them now. They pulled them off the shelves. And the reason they pull them off the shelves is that there's enough of an aftertaste from using an artificial sweetener, which is what they were doing, that the customer is saying, I'm not buying that. I'm not going to consume that. And the result is that the company stopped making them. So until the customers demand products that don't have sugar in them, they're not going to change. There's an old saying in marketing, when 6% of the market cares about something, you've got to change your marketing. When 20% care about something, you've got to change what you're doing.
I feel like that sort of just did a little circle for me anyway. And then, because when we're saying, what can you do today, or what can you do, what can you do in your life tomorrow to make a change? It's not just me going and looking in my pantry. It's me then making a concerted effort to stop buying those things, you know.
Yeah.
And like it's showing that we have the power. It's taking the power
Oh
back
yeah,
to us.
absolutely. If enough people don't buy products that are full of sugar or seed oils, they'll stop making them. They're in business to make a profit. And yes, the big picture is it's harder to make a profit if you don't put sugar in your food, but it's also hard to do it if nobody's buying your product.
What kind of impact do you think, you know, that this knowledge is having now? Like, we're 10 years down the track. That is certainly out there in the public consciousness, but is it having an impact in reality in the supermarkets?
It is ever so slowly. It is. So, for example, soft drink manufacturers like Coca-Cola are having a bad decade. You know, they're having to change their product mix. At the moment, they've got the life raft of fruit juices because the public awareness isn't quite there on fruit juices yet. People don't understand that fruit juice is just really, really boring Coke. You know, it just doesn't have the bubbles, but it does have as much sugar. And that's starting to get out, but it's early days. So at the moment, soft drink manufacturers have juices as a life raft. Their other life raft is that they're moving more towards just waters. So fizzy water, just plain water, and that's an ever increasing market share for them. But the fact that they're having to change says something straight away. The fact that there are, in fact, sugar-free options in a lot of food categories that simply weren't there 10 years ago means that it's starting to be enough that people can make money out of offering a sugar-free option. But we're still got a way to go yet.
Look, I think
and part of the reason for that is that our
no, I was just going to say a lot of this has got to do with you, David. You know, you've
I mean, that's very generous of you, but I don't think one voice can change anything. You know, it's got to be a lot of people. It's got to be a lot of people saying the same thing. People have got to hear this message from lots of people, not just from one crazy dude who wrote a book 10 years ago.
Lots of one voices make a big voice.
Yeah,
that's the whole
that's
point.
Right.
That's it.
Well, and in particular, we start to need to get authorities to say the same thing. You know, when people start hearing this from the Heart Foundation or from the government or from the dietitians, none of which are yet saying this, then people will start hearing it.
One of the saddest things, David, is, you know, the dietetics control, I guess, in hospitals and, well, just the cheapness of food in hospitals and I guess a lot of institutions. But I see, you know, 100 grams of sugar for a breakfast, you know, for a lot of my patients. And it makes me cry.
Particularly given why they're there in the first place. You know, it's, look, if the processed food industry, if dietitians didn't exist, the processed food industry would have had to invent them. They're an excellent way to sell product. And at the moment, they're a big part of the problem, not the solution.
There's other sort of movements, though, in sort of nutritional advice type people, sort of personal coach type people that are aware of sugar issues, I think. And
definitely.
maybe even gone too far. I mean, there's the Keto Paleo. What do you kind of make of that type of more extreme sort of approach, maybe?
I think it is extreme in the sense that it advocates for eliminating carbohydrates entirely in many cases. It has some really good features in that it tells you not to consume seed oils and not to consume sugar. Fantastic. Telling you not to eat carbohydrates. Look, great if you want to be a bodybuilder. Very important advice if you want to be a bodybuilder. For everybody else, not really good advice because carbohydrate metabolism is probably more influenced by, I don't know, the number of you know, genes on your AMY, genetic whatever it is, the starch processing allele or whatever it is. So you know, it's and telling everyone that the low carb diet is the solution to mankind's ills, I think, is distracting. Sure. And consumes a lot of effort and noise without seriously progressing us forward, because the things we really need to stop are the sugar and the seed oils.
Yeah, I agree.
But that being said, of all the mainstream diets, that's the one that stops both of those. So, if that's it, then that's it.
Yeah. So, David, thank you so much. Tell us a bit about what you're up to now, what you've been writing about and researching. And I know you're always onto a fabulous new topic as well, but tell us a bit about what you're doing, how people can get hold of your work. Give us the rundown.
Okay. All right. So just this very day, I signed a contract for the next book, which is about, it's actually taking a book that I did a few years ago, 2017, I think, about taming toxic people, which is about working with psychopaths. And this one drills into that in a lot more detail, and it was a book like Sweet Poison. It was focused on the science of it. What do we know about psychopaths? What do we know about how they're made up, how their brains are wired? Can they be changed? All that sort of thing. This book is about, let's take all that science and apply it in real life. If you're working for a psychopath, how do you deal with it? How do you stop them destroying your life forever, which is what they will do. So that's the next book. And in terms of I've written, I think, 13 books now. Wow. And I think you said before, what was one of the benefits? There's one.
But
you've got to say what it is.
That's a I've bought many of your books.
Toxic oil, yes.
I've given away many of your books too, so to people and friends and
excellent.
family. So
that one's a collector's edition. Don't give that one away, because that one's no longer in print.
Right. Okay.
I updated that in a book that came out 2 years ago now, called The Good Fat Guide, which is that updated and with some more practical information in there about how to pick where the fats are. Look, you can get them. Look, Amazon's as good a place as any. Anywhere that sells books, mostly, is the way to go. And if you want to see the latest, whatever I'm thinking about, I often write articles about it, stuff I'm thinking about at the time. Then my Facebook page, which is just my name, David Gillespie, you can just go there.
Great.
And I even sometimes reply to people on that page.
I noticed, because I noticed, because that was with the CC's one. Then a woman had actually asked about, what about the Woolworths brand? And you got back to her on that. And I went, wow, that's really cool. But I must say, one of the books that I'm looking forward to reading, and I have no idea whether it's going to answer this or not, but I'm actually planning on maybe giving it to my 14-year-old as well. Your free schools.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you were going to say teen brain, but
no,
free schools, yeah.
Actually the free schools, because I thought I really just in the synopsis of that, talking about how, paying a fortune for a school does not necessarily get you the best education.
No, and that book is all about how to tell. So how do you tell? By looking at a school from the outside. What are the ones? Because I'm not saying all schools you pay for are bad and all schools you don't pay for are good. That's nonsense. They're all a variety. And what that book is about is figuring out which is which and figuring out which is a good school. And if you can find something that's a good school that you don't have to pay for, then that's the one you should send your kids to.
Right. Is there anything in your life that you do not research?
Sometimes I really regret not researching things earlier. Sometimes I just take things as being true without looking at them. Seed oils is a great example of that. I should have looked at that a lot earlier. That is really, really dangerous stuff. And it makes sugar look like a walk in the park. And my frustration with that at the moment is I still haven't figured out a way to communicate that in a way that someone really understands it. But that's one I wished I'd picked up earlier.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I must admit, because as a mum, I didn't know a lot about I knew that you shouldn't cook I use the coconut oil and the olive oil, but I never thought about what oils were in the actual other products that I'm using. So
I look at that on every label.
Well, I know. Well, I haven't been looking at that. So
but unfortunately, it's really uninformative. A lot of the time they just don't say.
Right.
They say vegetable oil, which could be anything.
It could be anything. Well, I'm hopefully in podcasts like this and having chats like this, definitely my mum friends anyway we're all going to be discussing this the next time we sit down and have a chat to start figuring out some of this stuff and getting it right, feeling like you're doing your best job. So
I think the seed oil one to me is vitally important, particularly for kids. This is cumulative, non-reversible, and extremely dangerous. And because the results of this are, actual genetic changes, significantly increasing the risk of cancer, significantly decreasing the risk of reproduction, significantly increasing the risk of some really, really horrible diseases. And to me, that's the thing that really needs a headline at the moment. Not to say that sugar isn't bad. Sugar is very bad, but this really pushes way past sugar, because this can be intergenerational. The things that are done with seed oils in adults, in parents' lives, can affect their children, not because of what they're eating in their household, but because of what they ate before the child was born.
Wow.
So this is, to me, something that has that kind of effect, absolutely has to be called out. And worse than that, rather than with sugar. So the Heart Foundation, just with sugar, the Heart Foundation said, we never told people they should eat sugar, which is true. They haven't ever told people they should eat sugar. They've just never told them not to.
It's incredible, really.
With seed oils, they actively tell you to eat this stuff. They tell you to buy margarine. They tell you to get rid of saturated fat and replace it with polyunsaturated fat. They're actively doing you harm. And that's even worse.
Gosh. Well, before we say goodbye, well,
we never checked in, so
we better check
out.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We need to check out. Well, I'll start the checkout to give David.
How are you checking out?
How am I checking out?
Suzanne?
I feel like you have blown my mind, David. I'm so grateful that we've spoken to you today. Because I must admit, I was thinking it was going to be a lot about sugar stuff, but the seed oils and that, I didn't know any of that. That has really, that's like a little aha moment for me. So I'm really grateful for that. So it's taken 3 tries for us to get this podcast going, but I'm very
yes.
grateful.
I'm sorry to be so difficult about it. Yeah.
No, we all played a part in it. Yeah. So that's how I'm checking out.
Fantastic. What about you, David? How are you checking out?
Now, so what's checking out again?
Well, we were supposed to check in, which was to say how we're feeling, how was today, where we've come from, what are our emotions right now. So we want you to.
Oh, okay. Emotions. I don't know. I'm pretty happy most of the time, honestly. I'm especially happy today because I've just been commissioned to write a new book. So that's a good thing. And it's about something that I'm really interested in. So that's good. Being able to talk to you guys. This has been a great chat. Really has, and I've enjoyed it. So that's good. Trying to think if there's anything negative going on at the moment. I can't think of anything other than my usual irritating children.
I was going to say, you have 6 kids and you cannot think of anything.
Oh no, I can think of a lot of things, but none. They wouldn't appreciate me mentioning any of them on it.
I understand that. Well, how are you checking out, Richard?
I'm actually really good. It was an incredibly busy day today, but to finish it, or just to meet really one of the guys I actually admire so much, and I'm very thankful that my daughter handed me your book all those years ago, and it clicked in my mind reading that. And I drove people nuts for months and months and months, and even years.
So did I before I wrote it, because I'd done this 4 years before I wrote the book.
Right.
And it was only because I was so irritating about it that a friend of mine said, you really should write this down. And what I think he meant by that was so you would shut up. and I don't think he meant then turn it into a book and then keep talking about it for the next decade. I think he meant that will get it out of his system. I know where you're coming from.
So look, I'm very, very happy to have kind of met you. We've had little backs and forths over the years on Twitter, and you've always been very supportive and very friendly and helpful and full of information. And I just really admire you. So well done for everything you've done, and keep writing and keep being motivated and to educate people. It's wonderful what you're doing and what you've done. And I really think you're on the right
and what
track.
You're doing. This is a great idea, doing this podcast. And look, I would say in relation to Twitter, if at first I don't respond to you, try again, because I am terrible with all the messaging platforms. I recall seeing messages and thinking, now, where did I see that? Was that in Instagram, or was that in Facebook, or was it in Messenger, or was it a text, or was it an email? And it's always a good idea, if you really need to talk to me, just do it again.
So we're going to put this on YouTube. We're going to put this on Spotify and Apple Podcast and Google Podcast and a whole bunch of
Amazon Music.
Yeah. So, we'll do our best to get the word out, because I think you're a fascinating guest and we've got such important things to tell people. So we'll do our best to get this out there. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Really
absolute pleasure. It was great to meet you both. Yeah, well, in video form anyway.
Yeah. Hopefully in real life one day. Cool.
That's right. You're Sydney based, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, definitely. Next time, if I'm ever in Sydney ever again, I don't know. Haven't travelled anywhere for 2 years, so who knows?
We can have a beer. One of the things I loved about Sweet Poison was that a beer was okay and a red wine
beer's
was
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got to avoid the cocktail.
If it doesn't taste sweet, you're fine with alcohol.
No more margaritas. It's okay. If I can have the wine and beer, I'm okay. I can do without the margaritas then. And on that note, I will stop the recording and we'll say good evening.
Thanks so much, David.
Thank you for
See
joining
you later.
us.
Thanks
everyone.
for having me.
Yeah.